So earlier this week, we discussed escape pods within Star Wars, the life-saving elements designed to get crew off a vessel in distress. So I figured today we could talk about escape pods in real life in spaceflight and how they work in reality. I'm Colin, and this is Sci-Fi Deep Dive. Remember, if you enjoyed this video, to head down below and hit that subscribe button. So, when I refer to spacecraft in this video, I'm generally talking about the International Space Station, which, yes, while it is a space station, it is still a craft. It's moving, it's constantly changing, they regularly have to modify the station's orbit, so in essence, it's actually a really big spaceship on its own that we call a station because it does sort of function like an outpost. So, when I refer to crew getting off the spacecraft, know that I'm referring to crew getting off the space station, and I'll try to use station as much as possible. So, let's talk about that. There is currently 7 people on the International Space Station, plus another 3 on Tiangong. So, that's a total of 10 people in space at any given time. That's basically the standard now. So, how exactly do these people get back in the event of an emergency? Well, let's briefly cover the potential emergencies. You have things like fires and decompression events, you have minor impacts, you have serious medical concerns where if there's an injury on the station that cannot be fixed via the implementations they have on board, they'd have to bring the crew home to ensure that the crew member didn't pass away. So there's plenty of reasons for crew to come home in a hurry. So how exactly would they do that? Well, the answer is both a bit boring and a bit exciting. And the answer is how they got up there. In general, in modern spaceflight, the space station has escape pods, as in it has the vehicles that the crew came up in, that just stay docked at all times. The Soyuz and Crew Dragon spacecraft remain docked with the International Space Station the entire duration of the time that the crew that they brought up is on board. So you launch with one vehicle and you come back on that same vehicle, regardless of whether or not it's an emergency. In a crisis, either of these vehicles or both of these vehicles could undock from the International Space Station and return home in a matter of hours, getting away from the station relatively quickly and then coming home a bit slower. And theoretically, they could do it as fast as 30 minutes if they had to, but that would be an extreme rush, and chances are, in the event of an emergency, it would be a lot longer of an amount of time than that. That being said, these visiting vehicles do serve as the station's escape pods and are kept ready to depart at basically all times, so that in the event of an emergency, crew can return to the vehicles they came to space in and simply go home. Both of these vehicles are capable of obviously landing in atmosphere, and they both actually land fairly similarly, entering as a capsule and then descending under a parachute, albeit Soyuz lands on land and Crew Dragon lands on water, and there's some logistical differences between the two spacecraft, but generally they're very similar. And that's why these visiting vehicles stay on the station. They don't drop off crew and come home. In fact, this is a bit of a challenge during the shuttle era, because the space shuttle was not capable of spending incredibly long amounts of time in space. So as a result, any crew brought up to a space station, be it Mir or the International Space Station, needed another ride home in the event of an emergency. So generally, an open seat would be left on another visiting vehicle. In most cases, it was Soyuz. And so if there was an emergency, that crew member could just fill that empty seat and take that spacecraft home. But that was a bit of a challenge before the US and the Russians were working together. In the 80s, the United States was designing a space station called Space Station Freedom, the core of which would go on to be the US segment of the International Space Station. But they had an issue. They were going to get crew to and from the space station using the shuttle, and if they did that, they would have no ride home in the event of an emergency. So there actually was a campaign in the 80s and the 90s to design a re-entry vehicle that could be docked on the space station and left on the space station as an emergency evacuation vehicle for crew. And some of these projects did get pretty close to completion before the International Space Station kicked off, and the decision was made to just use Soyuz since it's existing technology and would be simple enough to use and has been proven to be able to be left on orbit for months, if not years at a time. So these visiting vehicles can serve as escape pods in the event of an emergency, but there is a bit of a caveat, especially going forward into the future of space exploration, because all of these visiting vehicles are entirely reliant on, number one, being attached to a huge space station, and number two, being in close proximity to the Earth, meaning a return trip home would be a matter of hours. If we're going to the moon, a trip home is going to take 3 days. And we're not going to have the kind of mass up there to have dedicated escape pods or even dedicated visiting vehicles. In reality, at least for the early Artemis program, our vehicle out to the moon is our only ride home, and if something happens to that, there's no way off it. You have to just hope that vehicle holds out. And the best example for this is going to be Apollo 13, where during their flight to the moon, the service module was severely damaged, and the crew had to rely on the life support elements of the lunar module to serve as a lifeboat of sorts, albeit not a traditional one. It didn't detach from the vehicle and make its way home on its own. It simply provided life support for a few days while the crew carried out a free return trajectory and made their way home. Something that, by the way, is still a very impressive achievement on the part of the team at Grumman that designed the LEM, but I would say lifeboat is more of a theoretical term there than a practical term. So, in general, if you have an issue in space, particularly in low Earth orbit, your best bet is to simply come home on the vehicle you went to space in, which should be docked right down the hall from you, and you can hop in and go home at any time in the event of an emergency. Which is vastly different from the way it works in Star Wars and other science fiction IPs, when your vessel that brought you to space may be the size of a cruise ship or a battleship. You need a more viable way of coming home if that vessel is stricken, so that's where dedicated escape pods come in. If you'd like to learn more about escape pods in science fiction and the way they're used particularly in Star Wars, although I do touch on some of the way they're used in other science fiction IPs, I'll leave a link up here to my video breaking down escape pods from Star Wars so you can compare them directly with the way we use visiting vehicles as escape pods in real life. And I'd like you to let me know down in the comments whether you think we should be thinking about how to build escape systems into ships that are going to the moon, or do you think at that distance the weight cost is simply not worth it, and we should be trying to make our spacecraft more durable to increase their chances of surviving any incident? And if you have anything else you'd like to see me cover in spaceflight or science fiction, let me know down below in the comments. Last but not least, if you enjoyed this video, head down below, hit the like button, the subscribe button, and the bell icon so you get notified when I upload new videos. So for Sci-Fi Deep Dive, I'm Colin, and I will see you next time.